let me set the scene for you. It's 2021. You've just started at a new job, or maybe at a new university. And you and all of your colleagues are wearing masks in order to protect one another. And maybe it happens in the first day, but maybe it takes a few weeks or even an entire semester before you go to drink that coffee, go out for lunch, and see each other without a mask for the first time. I remember the first time this happened to me. I remember feeling shocked and deeply unsettled because it's as if I had autofilled what their facial features looked like, only to find out that it was just slightly off. And from talking to my peers, I found out that this is a pretty universal experience for many mask wearers. And so I wanted to wonder, how could this be documented? How could I explain this experience? And with that, I want to introduce you to someone. This is Linz. I want you to take a moment, take a look at Linz, and tell me, could you imagine what she looks like without her mask? Maybe you look at the squint of her eyes and think what her expression might look like. Maybe you look at how the mask lays across her face and wonder the shape of the nose or the jawline or the cheeks. Can you sort of picture that facial structure? If given the opportunity, would you be able to draw it? I know I couldn't, but Mackenzie could. This is Mackenzie's drawing of what she believes Linz looks like. Notice the angular facial features, the broad smile, the delicate and long nose. Is this sort of what you were picturing Linz to look like? Or did you expect her to look more like this? This is Linz. And from seeing her real face, do you find any part of it surprising? Were you expecting more of the angular features like Mackenzie had drawn? Or were you expecting less of a smile or more of a smile? What surprises you when you actually see her without her mask? For Mackenzie, she said that, I suppose I chose the model because they looked very airy, like a nymph from mythology, and I absolutely love that vibe. That assumption bled over into the rest of the art. So for Mackenzie, there was this sort of intangible vibe, this feeling she got when she looked at the reference photo, and that's what went into her decision-making when making this drawing. What would it have been for you? If I had had the artistic talent, what would I have put? What would you have put? What is it that goes into our perceptions? Let's try this again. Meet Xavier. Once again, I ask you to consider what you think he looks like under his mask. Can you imagine his facial features, the mouth, the jawline, the nose? What facial expressions is he making? Did it look anything like this? This is Johanna Stockholm's piece of Xavier. What do you think? Is this what you were expecting him to look like? Is this like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how he looks without a mask? Or maybe you were expecting something more like this. This is Justine A's interpretation of what he looks like. Here we have two very talented artists who were given the exact same reference photo of the exact same person, and yet came up with very different results. Now, maybe neither of these quite line up with what you were expecting. Did you expect him to look like this? This is Xavier. Notice neither of them got his facial hair. And what else surprises you about the real shape of his face? Let's see what these artists had to say. For Johanna, she said, I thought about how they looked on top, and then I could see how their nose and head shape would look. And then I thought about their race a little bit too, maybe some stereotypical aspects to figure out how Xavier looks. For Justine, she said that based on how flexed the cheeks seemed, it seemed like Xavier was giving a very large smile, which is why their mouth is somewhat open. So once again, we have this situation where they have the same reference photo, and yet they come at it from a different framework. One artist used stereotypical information to help them figure out what might he look like, what kind of features might he have, whereas the other relied so much on what wasn't obscured by the mask, the flecks of the cheeks, the eyes, trying to see, is there a smile here, how big? And so, as we can see, there's so many different ways to look at it. And then I ask you to try this one more time with me. This is Lydia. Now, you know the drill by now. Imagine, what do you think Lydia looks like without her mask? Do you think her jawline looks a certain way? Can you imagine her nose shape? Or what kind of facial expression she might be making? And then I ask you, does it look anything like this? This is artist Cosmic's interpretation of what Lydia looks like. Did you expect Lydia to be smiling? Does this jawline look like what you might expect? I ask you then, is this more like what you were expecting? This is Lydia. Are you surprised? Or do you feel like Cosmic's drawing might have looked more like what you expected? Or does Lydia's real face seem like what you expected? Or maybe you had a completely different idea in your head altogether. For Cosmic, they said that I assumed that they were a bubbly, maybe an outgoing person from their hair, but also a soft aesthetic with their clothing. Going off their facial expressions, it seemed like they were smiling due to the eye shape. So once again, they are using the unobscured features to make their assumptions, but then they go further and they look at the hair and the clothes, these external features that really have nothing to do with the face and yet have so much to do with the face. And they use the assumptions that those give off to paint a picture of what this person looks like. So where do we go from here? What conclusion can we draw? You see, we have these different artists, and across this project, I have worked with so many different artists, and each one of them seem to have this different interpretation of what these faces look like. I've seen artists talk about racial assumptions or gendered assumptions, intangible vibes or personality based on hair and clothes. There's so many different frameworks and expectations that go into what people assume. So I want to ask you, what assumptions do you make about a person? What goes into your mind when you're looking at a person and thinking about what they might look like? What goes into it? What are you expecting? See, we don't have a whole lot of control over what comes next in the pandemic. A year from now, we might be in a mask-free society, or we might still be needing masks to protect one another. And I want to ask you that the next time you see someone with a mask, take a moment, consider, what assumptions might you be making? And what assumptions might they be making about you? Thank you.